And I also want to let you know too. I'm sure you've got like a network, but I'm happy to connect you with folks both inside and outside of Michigan, that could be helpful, and perhaps even that outside perspective folks may find a little interesting too, just to sort of see what other people and other institutions are doing. And when I say other people, I'm talking about people who are really leaders,
Oh,
in the
yeah,
field.
yeah,
So
that
just
would be.
FYI, I'm happy to help with that if interested in the future to make those connections.
Yeah, definitely. I'm interested in talking with anyone who's using these tools, actually using them in day to day, and mostly like I want to know how they're using it. Practical approach. We were thinking that we don't know what we're going to call this series, but something like how I use AI in clinical medicine. I wanted to use how I AI, but then I think there's a couple of podcasts called Hi I AI already, so
Mm,
we don't want to
mm.
get into copyright infringement. But I think
Well,
it's just
what you could do, just sorry to interrupt, is ask AI what you can call it.
there you go.
So,
We should ask that.
that that's what I generally do whenever I'm like stuck. I'll usually say, you know what, because and it'll depend upon the tool that you use when you ask that question. But if you use Michigan's system, and let me know if I'm jumping ahead, but um, if you use Michigan system, one of the limitations there, and it's great, it's amazing, but it may not capture the more up-to-date stuff that would identify whether or not other places are calling their podcast or their series How I AI. So it may be helpful to like ask a model that is using like retrieval augmented generation to determine whether or not some other place just recently came out with something that's fairly new. So, but that's what I've done that for several things, and it's been helpful. Just FYI.
I think this is like I'm so glad that you brought it up because it's something that I have been thinking about. I've been talking to Ashley about this, like this resistance from a lot of people about using AI, and I think the one concern, maybe not quite explicit concern that people say is, I want to state it, and I want to have you react to it, see what you think about it. Um, you know, like learning is such a sacred thing for us, like learning, and it is something that you go through. There's just, different methods to learn, and we take a lot of pride in learning and teaching, particularly in medicine. The, there's a lot of concern that using AI could, for the lack of a better word, rot your brain or turn you into a digital despot where you really can't think for yourself, where like, your choices are architected on top for you, and you're just kind of like receiving, and you use like essential capabilities that are we take so much pride in medicine. So what do you think about that? Do you think AI is going to make me more enlightened, or is it going to turn me into a digital despot?
Um, that's a great question. I feel like we could spend like at least 30 or 40 minutes on that
Oh,
on that
well,
question alone.
just to tell you
But
that I'm bringing it up because every year I do a subject of study, and this year this is the subject of my study is I'm going back from the beginning of the classics and try to answer this question like what is the danger of it? I think it's essential though. People are really worried about that.
yeah, I think it's a great question. And I believe that it's going to be very much user dependent. For myself, am I intermittently sort of wondering, and I'll give an example. When I'm using AI, I find that I'm able to um, sort of review and or check or almost supervise what the AI is doing, with the outputs that it gives me. And here I'm speaking of generative AI outputs. I'm able to sort of determine, does this make sense? Does this helpful? Does this resonate, et cetera, et cetera? And I think it's that piece or that part of things that's going to sort of really distinguish one user from another. The knowledge, the ability, the motivation to confirm those outputs and to collaborate effectively, recognizing one's own limitations, either or knowledge gaps, or recognizing the limitation and or knowledge gaps of the tool that's being used. So I think there's this potential for over reliance, under reliance, automation bias. You hear about terms like under or de-skilling, never skilling, etc. And those are all of the terms that people are talking about. And that's why I said you could sort of spend a lot of time on speaking or talking about each one of those. But I think generally it's going to depend upon the person. And that's going to be just how people are sort of their natural inclination, but then also how we train them to interact with these tools. So there's going to be people that are going to have to sort of fight against certain forces a little bit more. But I think we're going to have to sort of give people the tools to fight against some of those negative forces a bit more. And the same is true for people who are sort of fighting against other forces that may lead them to not rely upon AI enough, because that can be just as harmful. So to find that balance, I think that's where we don't know. Folks at Beth Israel, a friend of mine, Adam Rodman, is doing wonderful work. Adam Rodman and Jonathan Chin. So Jonathan Chin is at Stanford. Adam Rodman's at Harvard. They're doing great work around human AI collaboration, and they're actually trying to identify and describe what this should look like, so that we can avoid that de-skilling or harmful de-skilling, because I do believe that there are some instances where we need to not learn certain skills anymore, or never skilling, and so on and so on. So that's work. They're funded by the Macy Foundation. I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to come up with. Um, I don't want to do like a self plug, but myself, Jenna Weens, Karen Deep Singh, and Tom Valley wrote a paper in for ARC, maybe 2021, 2022, and it actually described this triadic human patient clinician relationship, and that sort of describes like what things could look like. But as far as the intricacies and the details there to avoid some of those negative impacts of AI, I think we're still very much trying to figure that out, including what it should look like in teaching and learning as well. So hopefully that part at least partially answers your question.
No, it does. I'm relieved to know that I'm not going to turn into a digital despot. So that's
Well,
I
it
do.
depends though, right? I mean,
It
like I said,
depends.
it's sort of, yeah, I think again, it depends on the person, like that over versus under reliance. And then I think it's going to also be like tool and or task specific as well. But there are certain things that we can just count on or rely on. Like it's going to eventually be better for us to rely on AI than it will be for us to rely on our own knowledge, skills, etc. That's what I think people are going to have to sort of become comfortable with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I had to, I mean, maybe I can share a little bit of how I think about it. I mean, not as formalized as you and your colleagues have put into that paper, but if I had to use like a certain principles when I try to interact with these tools, like probably the most important principle for me is that you want to think first and then use AI second. Um, yeah, there was I don't remember if you saw that MIT study. This got a lot of press where like they had a bunch of students use ChatGPT or write themselves, and then like a bunch of them didn't even know what the essays were. But within that paper, there was a group where they use AI and thinking, and the sequencing really matters. Like where you think first, use AI second to refine your thinking versus you use AI first and then think second. So I think this is like, from my perspective, whenever I use it, I try to stick to this principle of like, okay, I'm gonna think first. I'm gonna kind of distill what I know already, and then use AI second to refine my thinking, and then kind of create this loop of like, deepening my understanding through a set of tools that I, we're gonna show here. The other principle that I think is really helpful for people that are starting to use it is you want to engineer friction. Uh, at least I try to engineer some friction in learning specifically. Um, I think it's really easy to just kind of like to have a surface understanding of something and get the sense that oh, I think I know this, where like you don't really know you whether you have a deep understanding of something. And I think we know this from, just learning things generally when you ask someone to, you think you know something and you have to describe it to someone else and you realize how many gaps there are. So things like using a Feynman method or those engineering those kind of frictions of like, okay, explain it to me. And then even having a conversation with AI where like you try to explain it to it and then it can unmask a lot of gaps in your understanding, I think. And then I think the other principle that I always say is that it's a sycophant, so it kind of like cheerleads you. So you want to make sure that it's a coach, not a cheerleader. So you want to have prompts in there where, like, I have a few prompts that I'm happy to share with you as well. That is like, just be honest with me, like don't sugarcoat it, challenge my thinking. I think it's just like if you stick to those principles every time you interact, particularly when it comes to learning a difficult subject, an important subject, is super helpful. Um, so with that, I want to maybe show you how I use it, which is, and then get your thoughts about it to see if there's any hope for me. So, um, can I share my screen? Share my screen. Good. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Great. All right. So, generally, I would say the way it works for me, and please like interrupt me at any time. So the way it works for me, I have a set of cases scheduled with advanced fellow, generally like an electrophysiology fellow, usually PGY 7 or PGY 8. And before AI, the way it would work is that I, kind of look up the cases for myself, and then um, I have a set of papers that I had generally studied during my fellowship that I have in a file. And for deep understanding of those, I may have reread those and kind of think through how I would do the procedure, what challenges I would have, and then what are like some one or two specific areas that I would want to focus with a fellow. Um, so that's just generally pretty time consuming, but it's been something that I've done for like, 15 years generally. And so I have a deep understanding of a few subjects. So I wanted to use this example of like a procedure that I may be doing in the future of biventricular ICD implantation. So I have a paper that I have used in a long that in a for a long time. I upload that as background information to GPT. Um, when it comes to GPT, I generally stick with whatever is publicly available. You don't want to put anything that you don't own the IP to. There may be some issue that we may have some freedom to do it once we use our internal GPT, but for the purpose of this, I'm using only everything that's open source. So the first thing I do is I stick into that principle that we discussed, which is think first, AI second. I obviously know the paper. I've studied the paper many, many times, so I know what's in there. But I have this like little prompt that I put in just to reinforce the think first, AI second. Uh, this is a prompt that I read from a publication a little while ago, and I kind of adjusted it to what I wanted to do. It's kind of like I ask it to be my collaborator and ask me a bunch of questions to make sure that I get a sense of what it is. I kind of tell it what the goals are, what's the audience, and what's the context, and I give it some constraints. I'll stop here. Maybe, do you have any thoughts about it so far?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm sort of thinking is it is very much, I have to sort of approach, going back to that collaboration piece that I mentioned earlier, I really have to think about the model that I'm engaging with. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it is no different from me saying, okay, I'm like speaking to Dr. Ghanbari, who is an electrophysiologist,
Mm-hmm.
right? And no, he is not a general internist. I'm a general internist and a general pediatrician. So I know who I'm interacting with. Therefore, I'm going to frame my prompt in a way that's going to allow me to get the best output from this person. And here, I'm looking at, GPT or Chat GPT, and that's going to sort of lead me to think about how I need to structure and or format my prompt, right?
Mm-hmm.
If this were a non-reasoning model, just a regular like GPT, like the base model, not a reasoning model, then I that's going to potentially dictate how I frame things. So with that said, I sort of wonder, if this is the first prompt, I wonder if I would be a little bit more specific about who I am and who they are.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
So
Because
yeah.
that could very much dictate. So who I am, who they are, and maybe even more specific about the electrophysiology fellow and who they are as much
Mm-hmm.
as possible. Is it a first year fellow, second year fellow, third year fellow, et cetera? So those are some of the things that I'm sort of thinking about when it comes to like just like getting the model ready. And certainly again, depending upon the model that you're engaging with, maybe, that's a little less necessary. But so that's sort of the first thing that I was thinking. Um, and then, I totally appreciate the context constraints and stakeholders. That's like all super important. The other thing I was thinking about is just like for me, I generally have I have simple and I have like more complex prompting frameworks. My simple go-to framework is like the role task format. Like I always
Mm-hmm.
use that. Like if it's just like a really quick something that I need to do, it's role task format. If it's more complex, then I'm thinking about things like chain of thought reasoning, one shot, few shot prompting, etc. But in this case, I wonder if you could potentially be a little bit more specific when it comes to, again, role, task, and the format that you want the output to come in or be
Right.
presented in. So those are a few thoughts that I have. It's just sort of around the prompting of the model.
Mm.
Um,
It's an
yeah.
interesting. That's like a really interesting approach because the way I usually engage with it is that I kind of like upload the background material that I'm interested in, and I have it, and I try to set the context first before I get into like the prompt, the way you described it. So like I know the material already, and then I kind of like interact with it. I have it ask me questions. I may have it ask like, quiz me. So I kind of like make sure that I have a deep understanding of it, and like, does it unsurface things that I don't know? So for example, here when like this is my initial interaction with the paper, um, it's just asked me a bunch of questions that I could, you know, use to unsurface some of the gaps in the knowledge of the PGYH fellow. So like it maybe of all these things, maybe that's I think it's kind of interesting to like have him like draw it out. Um, and then once I kind of go through that, um, then I kind of get into the prompt you discussed, I think. Let me just go to the
Mm,
prompt.
mhm, mhm.
Which is like the prompt that I have here, which is kind of like you describe, I have like a role of purpose, like a large. So I guess I try to set the context first and then I get into the prompt, where you're suggesting that we should like just go right to the super prompt, right? So do you,
Ye
it's interesting because so this is one output, the way we
can I
described
can I
it.
also really can I
Yeah.
really also really briefly? So my recommendation here would be to make it conversational,
Hmm.
like start out with the prompt that you want, and then allow this to sort of just, in some respects, evolve the way that in a way that's going to be helpful.
Oh,
But even before that, you know, I what I typically do when I know that it's going to be a longer interaction with the model, I don't even start in chat gpt. I like, I can show you an example at some point or in the future, but I don't start my prompting. I will literally type this prompt in a Word document if it's going to be like long
sure.
enough, because these context windows, they're like, it's kind of small and I can't see everything and visualize everything. But if I'm doing it in a Word document, if I know it's going to be a long interaction with the model, I'll usually type it all up in Word. So, and because it allows me to just sort of think through it, because this prompt engineering allows me to think through it a bit more effectively. And then I'll enter that prompt. And then I don't have to sort of go through, in some respects, all of the interaction that may not be as necessary. And I can also, in some respects, sort of anticipate what the model may want to know and how it may respond.
No,
So
makes
I
sense.
sometimes I start outside of the model, basically, and
Mm,
I'll start in like a Word document or something like that to get my prompt the way that I want it.
that's perfect. And this is like, it's funny you mentioned that because I actually ran this as a separate chat um, with the prompt first. Um, this is like the prompt. And where do you keep your prompts generally? Do you have
I
like a
save
Word
them on
doc?
a folder. So I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, they're
I
totally
usually
like they're, yeah. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
keep them. No, I was gonna say I keep them in GitHub generally, but I guess you just keep them on like a Word document, like a repository.
Hmm. Hmm.
I
And
guess they're
I'll come
different.
back to them intermittently. You know, I don't think it matters as long as they're like saved and we can kind of go back to them. I think that's like really, really important. So
Perfect. So I guess one thing that we should probably in future events talk about is like how we're gonna actually engineer a prompt, right? Like what are some different ways of engineering a prompt and setting the prompt engineering, but also engineering the context. As you can see, like there's different ways to engineer the context as well as engineering the prompt. So this is a prompt that I've used and I have on GitHub for teaching CRT. It's kind of like starts exactly like how you described it, like who are you? What is the context in the background? Um, Specific inputs about the procedure and who the fellow is. Um, and then like yeah, kind of like focusing on specific areas. Like this prompt is really focused on like tailoring the teaching around the cardiac coronary sinus anatomy. So like a lot of things in there are focused on that. And then it kind of gives you an output, which is I actually just ran it this morning. So do you want to go through the output quickly or
sure, I
yeah.
can read through it really
Oh
quickly.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So like in phase zero, it asks me like, have them draw a coronary sinus. I think I might do that tomorrow. Sorry, Jeff, if you're listening. Yes. Um, yeah, I think this is also a pretty interesting question. Where is the CS ostium relative to RA? Because sometimes, and then this is like another like a high level question of like some coronary sinus anatomy anomalies and what those could be. So that's pretty good. I might use that. That's pretty good also. Like what happens if there's an injury? What's the difference in dissection and perforation? It's pretty good. That's
Mhm.
accurate. I might ask that. Um, Game-changing anomalies. Um,
What
so,
I really love about what you're doing, though,
mhm,
and I know that this, to you and to us, it seems like this is like, oh, that's a no-brainer, but you're going through each portion or each part of the output, and you're saying, for my learner or for my learners, this makes sense. This
mm,
is relevant. This is good. This is accurate. This is inaccurate, etc. And I can't emphasize that enough. You know, because I think sometimes people just say take it off the shelf and put it in there as opposed to tailoring it to their context, their environment.
yeah,
Because the AI can only know the context so much, right? Or the learners or the people that we're interacting with so much, and that is where that human part of it comes into play. we know the situation. You know what room you're going to be in, and the
Mm.
noise that's in the hallway, and the resources that'll be available to draw that coronary sinus, and so on and so on. So I think that's just an important part that shouldn't be underemphasized.
No, for sure. I think that's just like I think a lot of people that are using it are trying to like there's so much on social media about saving time, saving time, saving time. And I think that's just like misses the point. I don't really think it saves me that much time, but I think it deepens my understanding and it allows me to plan better for tomorrow. I'm not really focused on like saving time, you know. Um,
Yeah.
it's
I
especially when
think
it comes to
maybe
education. Yeah.
so I don't know. I think so. In my opinion, I think it saves time in places that I probably shouldn't be spending my time, but it allows me to add that time to other
Yeah.
places that are a bit more meaningful and that allow
Yeah.
me to go a bit more deeper in my understanding and the learner's understanding. So, totally, in the total grand scheme of things, probably doesn't save a lot of time. But those things that are just sort of like not as high yield, hopefully it does save a lot of that and it does make the learning and the teaching a bit more rich.
It's more fun for sure. Yeah, I agree. And then let's still go. So CS injury. So I think that's pretty good. I like this one. What would you do differently next time to increase the probability of like a better position? So kind of like, yeah, I guess I don't really like think about that at the end of the procedure. So I think I might add that tomorrow. Yeah, it keeps on wanting me to have them draw it out. Yeah, it's really much love this.
Yeah. So I guess
Do you
my
want me to
question,
add? Do you want me to
if
add
you
anything
see
else?
if you see that continue, it seems like it would like me to. Yeah, I noticed you're saying it seems like it keeps mentioning have me draw it out.
Mhm.
As you know, we could always say, this is great, great start. However, you continue or the drawing out, you continue to want me to draw this out. Let's think of something else that's engaging or that's helpful.
Huh, can I do
I
that?
think, yeah, to like just say, yeah, I like this drawing it out, but isn't there something else that we can do to make this more engaging besides drawing it out so that the learner can really grasp it and it's a bit more, dynamic and engaging? I often do that too. If I find that
Okay.
something's like, good idea, but like, give me something else. This is like pretty, um, you know, typical or it's becoming a bit redundant. Um,
Okay. Let's try it. Let's see what it says. Can you think of something else that is more engaging than drawing the coronary sinus anatomy? Let's see what it says. It's high value but low dopamine. That's pretty good.
that's the like is the like the the being a sycophant, right? Meaning like
Mhm.
it is acknowledging that you acknowledge that, and now it's saying, yeah, you're right. I'm going to give you something else that is, perhaps more engaging, and it even labels it as more engaging because it's trying to cater to what we're saying, right?
Yeah, what is this treasure hunt thing? I never thought about this. Treasure hunt with 5 clues. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I like all of them.
Yeah,
Fantasy
yeah.
football branch draft. Yeah, I don't know if I like this one either.
Mhm.
EGM floral room. That might be helpful here. So kind of like showing in an electrocardiogram and then trying to identify where they may be based on what their internal electrograms look like. So yeah, that may be the only one I like here. These
Mhm.
ones. Okay. Anything else? How about
The only
one thing
other
I
thing
will.
I would, oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
The only other thing I would say that I typically do, and sometimes you end up getting the same thing. I notice, clearly you're in Chat GPT. I will go over to Gemini and say, well, what do you think? This is what this model came up with. Like, what do you think about
Mhm.
this? Or do you see anything different that we could do here? So there are instances where I will sort of go from one to another and say, this is the output that I got. And Gemini is good because it has larger context windows. So you can put very large prompts in those relative to, say, a Chat GPT. So you can take that output from Chat GPT and say, this is what it gave me. Can you think of anything differently?
I see. So you put the output from GPT into Gemini and then use a thinking model, I assume, in Gemini, and then you have it evaluate the output, not the prompt.
Absolutely. Or you could do both.
Mm.
You could have it evaluate the prompt too and say, is there anything that you would add to this prompt that would like give me a higher yield output? You can do that too. So,
Mm.
generally I have like 5, 6 models that are open on my tabs.
Yeah,
And
you
I
can.
often, if I don't have a colleague, I use those as sort of colleagues, right? To say, what do you think about what we've come up with here? Is there anything that you do differently? And if I'm
Mm.
getting a bit of consensus there, I feel pretty good about it. And if it doesn't show me anything that's all that much more helpful, then I move on and just go with what I think is best.
Got it. Well, you can see it. I don't know if you can see all of my open tabs up there, but Notebook LM is
Yeah,
always
yeah,
open. Slide is always
yeah,
open on my.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't use Gemini as much as I should. I think it's pretty.
So
I
one
use
of the
Gemini
nice
on
things
my.
about
Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say one of the nice things, as I'm sure you know, U of M has a, a relationship with Google and their Gemini. So the prompts that we put in there, very similar to the prompts that we use in UMGPT. They are not used to train the model, and they are our data is private. But we're also able to access things from the internet. So that's one of the nice things about Gemini is that U of M has that relationship that allows us to interact with the model um, in that way. So.
Yeah, I think we should probably definitely make that up. But is there, I don't actually, I was not aware that you could internally use Gemini. There's a Gemini internal
So it
Umish Gemini.
so not within UMGPT, but you have to log in using your UMIsh email,
Oh, I
and
see.
you can use it that way. Yeah. So
Ah,
yeah, so it's not as I don't know. I don't know all of the intricacies of it. I definitely would not enter um, PHI in that for sure. But now, as you know, we can enter that PHI into a UMGPT. So I would not do that with Gemini. But we do have a relationship with them that allows us to access their thinking or reasoning model. And it's supposed to, in my understanding, is that it's protected and that our data isn't used to train the model and or our data is not viewed by other folks.
hmm. Yeah, that's great to know. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think we have to do several of these how I use AI and then have people that use that show us maybe show and tell of like how you actually do that. Because there's obviously
And
like internal Copilot that people are using, the Gemini,
oh, there's a
GPT.
lot to do. We're on Teams right now. There's a lot that you can do with the Microsoft Suite and Copilot and Teams. There is a lot that I think a lot of people are sort of missing out on when it comes to using AI for platforms like this. I think AI or Microsoft is headed in the right direction with this suite. And then we also didn't talk about things like open evidence and perplexity,
Oh,
and there's just so many that
yeah.
we could potentially talk
Well,
about. So
we definitely have to do this multiple times, I think. Yeah, like specifically like the tools that you said, like open evidence. I don't think there's like I don't know if there's ever been a more powerful tool than open evidence, to be honest with you, and when it comes to just everyday use in clinical practice and how quickly it's been adopted. And
yeah,
it's
agree.
quite excellent, I think. So I do want to do like maybe one session on just like how you use open evidence and get super
Hmm.
users. I use it all the time, but I'm super interested in like see how people are using that. Okay. So what are your thoughts on this inaugural how I use AI session that we did together? What do you think? Should we continue? This is
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you for inviting me months ago to chat with the division, but then thank you for inviting me to chat with you about this. In my opinion, I think it's a great idea, um, and I like the idea of keeping it brief
Mhm.
with like pointed questions, like things that are just like really like quick that people can like really that are actionable that people can like literally watch the video and like integrate or implement immediately after getting off and start doing things. So I like that part of it. And then lastly, in my opinion, this seems like something that most that the medical school would potentially benefit from.
Yeah, yeah, I for sure. Like we do want to like really focus in the first year with our group on like really just education and research. I think on the clinical side, there's a lot of other great people doing it, and there's a lot more friction, I think, with that because it has to be integrated as PHI. But I think on the
Mhm.
education side and the research, there's a lot of opportunity for us. So like, I do want to. I would love the opportunity if you could introduce me to people that are like practitioners of AI who are just kind of like using it, like I just showed you today. So that would be
Mhm.
wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I
Ashley,
just
maybe you
wanted
could stop
to.
recording.
Yeah, to that piece that you just mentioned, I think there's that all that overlap too